Now available for the first time in paperback. Stop Simping in the Workplace. Men, learn what you need to know in order to protect your job from workplace predators with Stop Simping in the Workplace. Available in paperback at online booksellers everywhere. Yesterday there was another mass shooting, and this was the 18th mass shooting for the entire year of 2018, and we're only 2 months in. Now, in this recent mass shooting, 19-year-old Nikolas Cruz is alleged to have taken an AR-15 rifle back to the public school that he went to murder 17 of his classmates and wound 15 others. And while many are making the argument that we need stricter gun control laws after this 18th mass shooting, I'm making the argument that the big problem with most of these mass shootings is not guns, is the fact that we are raising men in a way that leads to them to go out and participate in these acts of violence. Now, you've heard me talk about this in numerous videos talking about the beta male man crisis. And when I look at the Nikolas Cruz, I see a classic textbook example of another beta male who has short-circuited due to the way he is raised. And when I take a look at Nikolas Cruz's background and profile, it fits the same profile as Adam Lanza, Elliot Rodger, Stephen Paddock, and many other mass shooters, in that I take a look at their background and I see another beta male who has been raised in a single mother household. And what most people don't know is that 80% of these mass shooters come from single mother households. And when I look at their behavior, it's all the same behavior. And Nikolas Cruz's behavior fits the profile to a T. It's a perfect textbook example of another beta male. And what most people don't understand about beta males is this. When it comes down to the beta male, he has been raised primarily in a single mother household. And because he's been raised in a single mother household, he has been socialized to act and behave just like a female. And when this beta male grows up and eventually has to go out into the world, what happens to the beta male is this. The beta male thinks that the world is supposed to treat him just like a woman, but then the world treats him just like a man would be treated. And what happens to the beta male is that the beta male eventually short circuits and then he malfunctions. Now, a lot of people think that this malfunction will happen almost immediately, but no, this is not the case, because when it comes down to the beta male, because he is socialized like a female, what happens is he does not know how to navigate his emotions, he does not know how to deal with conflict, and he does not know how to problem solve in the way a man would. He does not know how to deal with his feelings. So instead of him dealing with his feelings by talking to another man or discussing things with another man, what happens is the beta male will sit there and he will simmer and boil in his feelings. And on the outside, he will look like somebody who was pleasant or friendly. And what happens is on the inside, he is simmering and boiling in a rage. And eventually, this rage gets to the point where they eventually explode. And when these guys go out and explode, what happens is they go out here and participate in these horrific acts of violence. And when I look at this Nikolas Cruz, I see a classic beta male as that's out here. I see another classic beta male, because here we have a beta male who has been raised in an adoptive single mother household. And when his mother passed away, what happened to this Nikolas Cruz is that he grieved his mother and he didn't know how to deal with his emotions regarding it. And I see a male who didn't know how to deal with his emotions regarding being a man, because after his mother passed away, he had to go live with a friend. And as he went to go live with his friend, what happened was he was probably being judged as being a man by the father in that home and being held to the same standards as a man would be held to. And what happened is your Nikolas Cruz wound up starting to short circuit. Now, when it comes down to many of these beta males who are in these single mother households, they are often enabled by the mother, because the mother oftentimes has a codependent relationship with these boys, and they coddle and spoil them. And I looked at Elliot Rodger's manifesto, and I saw that same coddling and spoiling with him, and I also saw it with Adam Lanza, and I see it also with Nikolas Cruz, because Nikolas Cruz was allowed by his adoptive mother to own many of these knives and guns that he presented on his Facebook profile and on his Instagram. And she enabled a lot of his dysfunction because she thought that this would help him become a better man. This is what a lot of mothers in single mother households try to do. They want the boy to be a man. They believe they can raise the boy to be a man. But again, the only person who can raise a boy to be a man is a father or another man. And this boy looks like he was overcompensating for his insecurities regarding his own masculinity in his Instagram and his Facebook profile, because when I see a male holding up guns and holding up knives, I see a boy who has an issue being insecure in his masculinity, and he overcompensates by presenting hyper masculinity in things like he did on his social media. Because what I saw on Nikolas Cruz's Instagram and Facebook was a male who was hyper masculine. He was hyper masculine, insecure in his masculinity, and he was using these weapons as a way to overcompensate. And all this talk about going out to participate in these acts of violence was, again, him overcompensating for his feelings of inadequacy regarding his masculinity. And his enrollment into the ROTC also fits into this because, again, he had no male figures and he was looking for a way to figure out what being a man was all about. This is why he went down there with this ROTC shirt on, because he wanted to express his masculinity in some way and express his masculinity in a way that showed that he was a man. So I look at that, and because a lot of these beta males, what they do is they hide behind symbols. This is why you see beta males in their Facebook profiles having baseball team logos up, or they're having football team logos up, or they're having other sorts of symbols up of different characters, because they aren't really confident in their own masculinity or their own manhood. So they need these symbols to hide behind, because it gives them a place that they can feel comfortable about being masculine. And I look at this Nikolas Cruz, and he was showing, again, classic textbook examples of beta male behavior. And what most people think these days is that this is a mental health issue. But yes, that's only part of the issue. The big problem with why we're having all these mass shootings is because we are raising males in a dysfunctional way. Many of these white feminists back in the 1960s and the 1970s told America the lie that they could raise a boy to be a man on their own. They were strong and independent. They did not need a man. But when we take a look at these men 50 years later, they are all short circuiting because they were not raised with any sort of father or male figures in their lives. And because they were not raised with a father or a male figure in their life, this is why they're going out into the world when they go on their own and they're falling completely apart. Because I look at all of these backgrounds. I look at the Stephen Paddocks. I look at the Elliot Rogers. I look at the Adam Lanzas. I look at the James Holmes. I look at all these males, and the reason why they are short circuiting is either because they grew up in single mother households, or they grew up in households with beta males themselves who had no masculine energy. And then the first minute they run into some sort of conflict, which means for them to be a man, they don't know how to be a man. And because they don't know how to be a man, they react to things in the way a woman would. Because when it comes down to women, they don't know how to navigate their emotions, and sometimes they'll act impulsively, but then there are times when they will just simmer and boil and then eventually explode. And when it comes down to the beta male, he usually just winds up simmering and boiling for years, and most people won't know. But in this case, people started to see the warning signs regarding this Nikolas Cruz. And because they saw the warning signs, they tried to do something about it. However, the actions that they took, I believe, actually triggered this guy, because when it comes down to the beta male, most people need to understand this concept. The beta male wants to have a smooth world. The beta male wants a world with no conflicts, no problems, no issues. And if there's just one little hair taken out of place in the beta male's smooth world, that can lead to trigger an eruption in the beta male. That's why the beta male is extremely dangerous because we don't know what will set a beta male off. It could be something as simple as them being out of hash browns at McDonald's to trigger them, or it could be something as big as what happened to Nikolas Cruz, where his mother passed away and he had to deal with the harshness of the reality of life for being a man because he had to deal with not only the passing of his mother, but he also had to deal with the harshness of reality because I look at Adam Lanza's background, and that was one of the things that wound up setting him off was the fact that his mother was getting ready to send him away, and he had to deal with life where this codependent relationship he had with his mother was finally going to be severed, and he had to go out and be a man on his own, and that's what led to him short-circuiting, malfunctioning, and then eventually exploding. It's a whole process, but most people aren't looking at the psychological issues behind it. They're just thinking it's a mental health issue they can deal with some sort of medicine or some sort of therapy. But no one wants to get to the real roots of this issue. If we got to the roots of this issue, that would mean we would have to confront many of the women out here, especially many of these feminists out here, who said we could raise a boy to be a man on her own. And we see from all of these beta males who have been short circuiting over the last couple of decades that this is the core reason why we have this uptick in mass shootings. The reason why we have this uptick in mass shootings to the point where they're almost every day is because we've had, again, all these women out here saying that they could raise these boys to be men. And the problem is they raise these boys in a dysfunctional way. Because there is no father in the home, what happens is these boys are being raised and socialized like women. And then when they go out into the world of men, what happens is they wind up short circuiting, they wind up simmering and boiling in rage, and then eventually some event comes by to trigger that rage, and they eventually explode, and that's what leads to them going out here and participating in these horrific acts of violence. But you can't explain this to most people because they want to deflect away from holding females accountable and talk about gun control laws. This is not a gun control issue. This is a self control issue. And the only person who can teach a boy about self control is a man. And we're not bringing men into this discussion regarding these mass shooters. We really need to bring men into this because this is a men's issue. Because only men can solve the problem related to most of these mass shooters. Because if there were, I believe, if there were more men involved in these boys' lives, it could save more lives. Because this is the big problem with all these mass shooters. We don't have any sort of people talking about this as a man issue because no one wants to confront women about the way we are raising boys, and no one wants to call out feminism for raising these boys in a dysfunctional manner. When I look again at Nikolas Cruz, his pattern of behavior and his pattern of acting fits right within the same profile of other mass shooters like Adam Lanza, like Elliot Rodger, like James Holmes, and like Stephen Paddock, and like Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. They all fit the same pattern. They all fit the same profile. They were all beta males. And you have people out here saying they're putting up a hashtag on social media talking about enough is enough. Well, I'm sorry. What's going to happen is we're going to see more and more of these mass shootings. You can put up all the hashtags you want, but if you do not confront the way we are raising boys in American society, we are going to see more and more mass shootings. This is what I predicted in videos for years and blogs for years. I've talked about this extensively as related to men's issues. We are in the middle of a beta male man crisis, a man crisis that started all the way back in the 1960s with the feminist movement telling women they were strong and independent, they did not need a man, and that they could raise a boy to be a man on their own. Well, that led to the social engineering of the beta male. And when you have a beta male, you have a man who has been raised by women and has no understanding of how to be a man, how to navigate the world as a man, and does not know that he is judged by a different standard as a man. And he goes out here believing that he can live life as a man just like a woman would and get away with doing some of the behaviors that women participate in, not understanding that he will be judged by a completely different standard as a man. And when he goes out into the world again, he winds up having a short circuit because men judge him as a man and he's not used to that. And then as he's short circuiting, he simmers and boils in anger as he's judged by male standards and held to male standards by both men and women. And as he's dealing with this conflict because his mother raised him to believe the world was a certain way, he simmers and boils in anger. And then eventually, as he sees the world doesn't work the way he was told it was supposed to, he eventually explodes because some event winds up triggering him and he winds up falling completely apart. We have to really take a look at the way we are raising males, and we really have to understand that it takes two parents to raise a boy to be a man. A boy needs a mother to nurture him, but he also needs a father to teach him discipline, because it's the father's ability to teach the boy discipline and character that leads to him becoming a man who can go out and survive in the world. When a boy is raised just by a female, in most cases, he winds up malfunctioning and then he winds up going out to participate in these horrific acts of violence. If you want to stop these mass shootings, we really need to have a real serious confrontation in the way that females are raising men, and we really need to start taking constructive action to get fathers actively back in the lives of their children so that children can have a balance of masculine and feminine energy. People say enough is enough. Well, I say it's time for us, if we really want it to be enough, you're going to have to do something about the sad, sorry state and condition of the American family. Because unless you start letting men have a more active role in the lives of children and let fathers have a more active role in the lives of their children, you're going to see more and more mass shootings, because with all these malfunctioning males out there, all it takes is one little event to trigger them. And what most people don't understand is we have a whole 2 or 3 generations of ticking time bombs we need to make an effort to defuse before we have a literal explosion that could literally mirror the horror of what we saw in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, because that's how many time bombs we have floating around here from the last 2 or 3 generations of these beta males. And most people aren't taking the issue of the man crisis seriously because they're too caught up in the deflection regarding gun control. And in this gynocentric state, most of these people don't want to confront the female for the way she's raising the male, nor do they want to confront feminism for creating this socially engineered aberration known as the beta male. The person who created this beta male and led to this man crisis no one wants to acknowledge. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to learn more about men's issues, you can pick up my Simp series books on Amazon.com. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.